If you grew up anywhere near the Hitch Desert of New Mexico, none of what follows is going to surprise you. You already know the land does not stay still, that the same mesa can be bone dry at noon and running with flash floodwater by evening, that the silence out past the last fence post is not emptiness so much as patience. The light here does something no other landscape quite manages, turning the same stretch of ground 3 or 4 different colors between sunrise and dusk. And that shifting light has a way of convincing outsiders that a place this visually generous could not possibly be holding anything back. This list is not for the people who have spent their whole lives reading that landscape correctly. It is for everyone else, the visitors who see red rock and blue sky and assume the danger here works the same way it does everywhere else: loud, visible, easy to spot coming. New Mexico's danger has always worked differently, and the people who live here have simply never needed anyone to explain it to them. 10 things share this state with you, counted down from the ones a first-time visitor half expects to the one nobody driving through ever thinks to ask about at all. 10. The black bear. New Mexico's bear population moves through the Sandia and Sangre de Cristo mountains and down into foothill communities with a regularity that longtime residents of Santa Fe and Los Alamos already treat as unremarkable, the same way people elsewhere treat a raccoon working through a trash can. What changes year to year is not the bear's basic behavior, but the drought cycle, and a dry summer in the high country reliably pushes bears lower and closer to trash cans and bird feeders than anyone would prefer. Wildlife officials relocate a predictable number of habituated bears every season, and the pattern is always the same. An animal that learned human food was worth the risk long before anyone else in the neighborhood realized it was happening. Longtime residents of these foothill communities describe the same seasonal rhythm every year: latched trash cans in dry years, unlatched carelessness in wet ones, and the bear behaving exactly the way that rhythm predicts every single time. 9. The Moonton Elion. New Mexico holds one of the healthiest cougar populations in the Southwest, spread across the Gila wilderness, the Sacramento Mountains, and the rugged country ringing Albuquerque's east side. And residents who spend real-time outdoors here already carry the specific kind of awareness that comes from decades of shared territory rather than sudden alarm. A mountain lion in this state does not need to be seen to be present. Wildlife trackers following radio-collared cats have documented individuals passing within a few hundred yards of hiking trails and residential fence lines without a single reported sighting, which tells you less about how rare the animal is and more about how good it has always been at choosing not to be noticed. Longtime residents rarely treat that fact as alarming so much as simply factual, the same way a rancher mentions weather, an accepted condition of living here rather than a threat requiring daily vigilance. 8. The elk. New Mexico's ELK herds concentrate in the Gila and Valles Caldera regions, drawing hunters and photographers in roughly equal numbers, and for most of the year that arrangement works out fine for everyone involved. The fall RUT changes the math completely. A bull elk defending territory during breeding season operates with almost no patience for anything resembling competition, and New Mexico Game and Fish documents a reliable handful of encounters every autumn involving hikers or photographers who misjudged how close was too close. Hunters who have spent decades in the Gila describe the rut the same way every season, an animal you can read perfectly well if you already know what to look for, and one that punishes anyone who does not. The elk was never hunting anyone. It simply stopped distinguishing between a rival and an obstacle the moment the rut began. The next stretch of this list trades size for something considerably harder to see coming: animals small enough to disappear into the exact ground you are standing on. Number 7. The Western Diamondback rattlesnake. This is the rattlesnake most New Mexicans picture when the word comes up. Common across the state's lower elevations and disturbingly comfortable sharing space with people, turning up in garages, under porches, and along the edges of well-traveled desert trails. Its camouflage against sand and caliche is close to perfect, which means most bites happen not because the snake struck without warning, but because a hand or a boot landed within range before anyone registered that the ground itself was partially alive. The venom is hemotoxic, breaking down tissue rather than the nervous system, and New Mexico hospitals treat a steady, unsurprising count of bites every warm season, almost always from someone who insists they were watching where they stepped. Longtime residents will tell you the same thing every time. A rattlesnake gives every warning it has before it strikes. The trouble is that most people never learn to recognize the warning until well after they have already ignored it. And by the time the buzz in the grass registers as a sound instead of background noise, the distance that mattered has usually already closed. Number 6. The black widow spider. Every unused shed, stacked woodpile, and undisturbed garage corner across New Mexico offers exactly the stable, low-traffic habitat this spider prefers, and its bite often goes unnoticed at first, registering only later as cramping spreads outward from the site with an intensity that has sent more than one otherwise healthy adult to an emergency room, certain they were having a cardiac event. The spider does not seek out contact. It simply never leaves, generation after generation, in the same undisturbed corners humans reliably forget to check, and firewood carried in from an outside stack without a second glance remains the single most common way a black widow ends up somewhere it was never invited. 5. The Gila monster. New Mexico's Boot Heel region, tucked into the state's far southwest corner, marks the eastern edge of this animal's entire range, and its rarity here is precisely why so few residents think to be careful around it. Thick-bodied, strikingly patterned in black and orange, and deceptively slow-moving, it leads people to assume the danger is minimal. The real risk is its grip, not its speed. A Gila monster that bites does not release quickly, instead working venom deeper through a chewing motion that can last several minutes, producing intense pain, dramatic swelling, and a documented drop in blood pressure severe enough to trigger shock. The handful of confirmed New Mexico bites share the same detail nearly every time, a hand reaching into a rock crevice without checking what already lived there. Herpetologists who study the animal in this part of its range note that it spends the overwhelming majority of its life underground, surfacing only briefly to feed or breed, which means most New Mexicans who share the boot heel with it will go an entire lifetime without ever crossing paths with one at all, a rarity that has turned the rare confirmed sighting into something closer to local legend than routine wildlife encounter. 4. The tarantula hawk wasp. New Mexico made this insect its official state insect decades ago, which tells you something about how much affection and folklore surrounds an animal most other states would simply avoid mentioning. It is enormous by wasp standards, a metallic blue-black body with vivid orange wings, and it hunts tarantulas specifically, paralyzing them with a sting entomologist's rank among the most painful in the insect world. A pain researchers have described as immediate and completely incapacitating, though mercifully brief. The wasp's entire hunting strategy is built around that sting, subduing a spider many times its own size, just long enough to drag it into a burrow and lay a single egg inside the still-living body, a detail that unsettles most people far more than the sting itself ever does. Encounters with people are rare, and stings even rarer, since the wasp reserves its venom almost exclusively for spiders rather than defense. But the handful of New Mexicans who have been stung, usually by accident, while gardening or clearing brush, describe an intensity that no amount of advance warning fully prepares you for. Entomologists who study the species point out a strange detail that makes the sting almost bearable in hindsight. The pain hits so hard and so completely that it leaves little room for anything else, and it fades almost as quickly as it arrived, gone within minutes, even though it feels, in the moment, like it could not possibly end. Most New Mexicans who have grown up around the insect describe a genuine fondness for it despite that reputation, watching one glide low and slow across a summer trail the way you might watch any large, unhurried, faintly menacing creature that has clearly earned the right to move at its own pace. Number 3. The bark scorpion. Southern New Mexico's desert reaches share enough climate with neighboring Arizona that the same notably potent bark scorpion extends its range across the border into the state's warmer counties, thriving in the same rocky, sun-baked terrain that draws hikers and rock climbers to the region's canyon country. It hunts at night and spends daylight hours tucked into shoes, folded towels, and bedding left on the ground, which is exactly how most stings happen. a bare foot meeting a scorpion that had simply been looking for shade. The sting itself produces a sharp, immediate pain, often compared to a hot needle, and in a small percentage of cases, particularly among children or those with heightened sensitivity, symptoms escalate to numbness or muscle spasms severe enough to require hospital treatment. Southern New Mexico households in scorpion country develop the same habit almost universally, shaking out boots and bedding before use, a small daily ritual that outsiders rarely think to adopt until after their first sting teaches them why it matters. 2. The coyote. Albuquerque and Santa Fe's expanding foothill neighborhoods have pushed directly into established coyote range, and the animal's adaptation to that overlap has produced something wildlife officials did not fully anticipate: a generation of coyotes considerably less wary of people than their rural counterparts. Small pets left unattended in yards remain the primary concern, and while attacks on adults stay rare, the state's wildlife agencies field a steady seasonal stream of reports from residents describing an animal that no longer treats a fenced yard as off-limits the way it once reliably did. Longtime foothill residents describe the shift the same way almost every time. Not fear exactly, more a quiet recalibration of what counts as normal for a backyard at dusk. The same kind of adjustment their grandparents made a generation earlier when the animal itself was still considered a purely rural concern. One entry left, and it is not an animal at all, at least not in any sense a trail camera could ever capture. And now the one thing almost no visitor to this state ever thinks to ask about, because it does not look like anything at all. Number 1 is the dust, specifically a fungus called Coccidioides that lives in New Mexico's arid, undisturbed desert soil, spread across huge stretches of the southern and central parts of the state, and released into the air whenever that soil gets disturbed, by wind, by construction, by a dust storm rolling across the open desert, by something as ordinary as a truck tire kicking up dirt along an unpaved road. The fungus produces spores small enough to travel deep into human lungs on nothing more than a lungful of ordinary desert air, and once inhaled, they can cause a respiratory illness New Mexicans have long called valley fever, a name that undersells exactly how serious the infection can become. Soil scientists studying the fungus describe its distribution the same way they might describe an old, patient resident of the land itself, present in the same undisturbed ground for longer than any ranch house or highway built on top of it, waiting only for the wind to finally do the work of moving it somewhere new. Most people who inhale the spores experience nothing worse than a mild, flu-like illness that resolves on its own within a few weeks, which is part of why the danger stays so invisible even to people who have lived their whole lives in spore-heavy soil. But in a meaningful minority of cases, the infection spreads beyond the lungs entirely, into bones, joints, or even the membranes surrounding the brain, producing a chronic illness that can take months or years to fully resolve and, in rare but documented cases, becomes fatal. Physicians who treat the disease regularly describe the same diagnostic blind spot every year, a patient with weeks of fatigue and joint pain who never once considered that ordinary desert air might be the actual cause. New Mexico's health department tracks valley fever cases every year with the kind of quiet consistency that suggests this is not some rare anomaly but a known, ongoing feature of living in this landscape, one that public health officials openly acknowledge remains underdiagnosed, since a flu-like illness in dry desert country rarely gets tested for a fungal cause unless a physician specifically thinks to look for it. Longtime residents of the state's southern counties will sometimes mention it almost in passing, the way people elsewhere mention pollen season, an accepted seasonal cost of the exact same wind that makes the desert here so strikingly beautiful to look at from a car window. There is no bite here, no sting, no visible animal to photograph or avoid. The fungus does not chase anyone, does not ambush anyone, does not even qualify as an animal in any sense that would let it appear on a nature documentary alongside a mountain lion or a rattlesnake. It simply waits in soil that has looked exactly the same for longer than any road or ranch house built on top of it, activated only when the wind decides to move. And that is the real shape of the thesis this entire list has been building toward. New Mexico's desert has never needed loud, visible danger to be exactly as serious as it looks from the highway. The bear and the mountain lion and the rattlesnake earn the caution people already know to bring here, the same caution generations of New Mexicans have folded into ordinary daily life without ever treating it as a warning worth repeating out loud. The dust earns almost none of that caution, because nothing about a clear desert sky moving across an empty road looks like the kind of thing anyone needs to hold their breath against. New Mexico was never hiding this. It simply never needed to announce something the wind has been carrying the entire time, long before the first paved road ever cut through this particular stretch of desert, and long after the last one eventually crumbles back into it. The people who already live here understood that trade the moment they decided to stay, and the ones just passing through are the only audience this list was ever really written for. If you found this fascinating, hit subscribe for more stories like